Hey, builders. Is that what we call the people that build builders? I don't
I
know.
guess so.
I guess so. I'm Carl Franklin from 𝗦𝗲𝗀𝗃𝗃, and that is Don Wibier from DevExpress. Hey, Don.
Hey, Carl, how are you?
Excellent. Your demo today is a Blazor Windows Forms app. You don't usually think of web apps and Windows Forms apps in the same app. What's going on here?
Wouldn't it be cool to incorporate some newer technology, some newer design patterns into your existing Windows Forms application so you can maybe even slowly migrate into like web-based applications?
So you're saying that I can sort of mix and match web content and Windows Forms content in the same form, same Windows Forms app?
Once you have listened and watched my story, you can.
Great. Carry on.
Before we start, let's have a quick look at what Blazor Hybrid is. You might think of it as being some sort of browser control without an address bar and navigation, which can be put on a form. And partly it is. The other part is the possibility to execute Blazor C# code from your WinForms app and execute WinForms C# code from the Blazor part. So if you want to get started with Blazor Hybrid on WinForms, then I would suggest you go to the page that is displayed right now. It has an outline with steps you need to perform to get Blazor Hybrid running in your WinForms application. And I will follow most of these steps, but I will do a couple of things slightly different because that will give us a bit more power and more fun.
All right.
I have already created a small WinForms application, and this is obviously created with the DevExpress project template gallery, and it will use our unrivaled data grid
Yeah.
with some other cool controls, as you can see here. But yeah, basically the application is quite simple. So I have this fake data which was produced. If I double click any of the rows, I'll get a nice customer pop-up. And when I hit OK, it will be stored.
Yep.
You see? Yep.
Sure.
So, no rocket science here. I have also set up a similar application which is running in Blazor.
Okay.
So, also this application has been created with the project template gallery from DevExpress. And what we have is the already famous counter page, which will just work. We'll have the weather page with the weather forecasts, which is actually using our Blazor data grid.
Okay.
And again, I have incorporated similar functionality with this customer data store. I can delete one, but I can also edit one. And if I do that, I'll go in this case to a separate page. But the data grid obviously also supports a nice little pop-up. But when we're going to mix and match, you'll see why I did the edit page on a separate URL.
Okay, cool.
So in Visual Studio, what I have done, I have set up those two projects. As you can see, I have the Blazor application on top in the same solution, and I have the Blazor WinForms application also available.
Okay.
The first thing that we need to do is we need to follow one of the steps in the document, and that is a very important step here. So once you scroll down a bit, you're creating a new project, which is all very interesting, but the most important detail is right here.
Yeah, so you change your project SDK from Microsoft.NET SDK, you just append that .razor at the end.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's copy that over into my Visual Studio. So here is my WinForms, and as you mentioned correctly, it's now Microsoft.NET.SDK. I'm going to put Razor behind it.
Yeah.
And this will give us a couple of extras in this project. And obviously, one of them is if I now right click my project and I'm going to add a new folder, which I will call www.root, what you'll see is the little globe in front of it.
Yeah. And otherwise, it would just have a regular folder icon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, what this means is that this will actually be compiled and stacked up properly to be like a web asset folder. So you can put in some static assets,
Sure.
which is what we're going to do right now.
Okay.
I'm just going to copy over these ones.
All right.
Yeah, so that was not too difficult. Another thing which is important, which is also described in this document, is that we need to include an index.html page.
Uh-huh. And that's different because in .NET 7 WebAssembly projects, we had an index HTML. But in .NET 8, there's no index HTML. All that stuff is in app.razor, right?
Yeah, correct. But yeah, we're gonna be adding a NuGet package obviously to the project, which is the web view, and yet that needs to have like this HTML page, which will be hosting your Blazor application. So
very good.
That's why we need it. So let's put that in as well. And what we can do is we can copy over the text that was on the Microsoft website, but I prepped a small little template that will put in a couple of extra things like some style sheets from DevExpress and some other stuff that we'll need to get the application running.
Excellent.
But I think most interesting part here is this one.
Right. Because in a Blazor web app, that would be blazor.web.js. And so WebView has the same interfaces, so everything, that calls it doesn't care what it is, but inside you have all the goo for the WebView control.
Correct. Yeah.
Nice.
These are two very important steps. So that project type and this file. And now we can start incorporating the Blazor Hybrid basically. So let's go to one of the steps above. And that is, we need to add this package right here, the Microsoft ASP.NET Core components.webview.windowsforms. So I get you have done like one of the WPF similar projects as well, right? And this typically works the same?
Yeah, it works great. It's the same kind of thing. You basically, your main XAML page has the web root control in it, and that's it. And everything else is Blazor. And it's important to note right here, Don, that what we're not doing is putting a web app inside a Windows Forms app. What we're using is the Blazor component model, but we're not in a web sandbox here. We have access to the entire machine. So behind a Blazor button click event handler, you could access the system resources. No problem. You couldn't do that in a web app, right? So you are using Blazor, the component model, but not Blazor, the web platform.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you will see in a minute how much fun we can have with this really powerful combination and how this all works very nicely together. So in the meantime, that package has been added.
Okay.
Before I continue, let me close down the application to get any build errors because the application was still open. Now, what I will do is, we will have something which I will do slightly different from the document right now because this will give us a bit more power. And I'll show you exactly what we're facing.
Okay.
If I go to my main form here, what we'll see is I have prepared some code. And what you can see here is that there is a private member customer store that will initialize the customer store with the customer data, and that will be bound to that customer's control, which is holding the data grid. But now we want to start using the Blazor stuff. So for this, we will need to use that web view. And one of the things that I will do is I will need to change this type to a Blazor web view, which is part of that package that we just added. You could drag that web view out of your toolbox, but I'd rather use a small little routine for that, which I have prepped already, which will set up, as you can see, that web view.
Yeah.
And here is something that I'd like to address differently from what is described in the documentation. That web view needs a service collection. And that is, that's how are we going to do that? Because typically most WinForms applications don't use dependency injection,
That's
or
right.
at least not dependency injection as being used in Blazor. But we need to do something about it, right?
Yeah, I would prefer to use dependency injection with a Windows Forms app. Why not?
Yeah, and actually that is not too difficult. So let's make a few modifications to the application. So we'll have full dependency injection from within all of our WinForms forms as well, basically. And for that, we'll need to go back to our program.cs file. So we'll leave this little wobbly line underneath it. We'll get back to that a bit later. But I guess most WinForms applications look like this. And what we can do is, if you include the Microsoft Extensions dependency injection package from NuGet, you can use the following construction to create a default builder, which will have a method configure services. This is something which looks quite familiar, right?
Yeah, so you just add all the services that you need right there. And I see that you've added form main as a service, as a transient service.
Yeah.
And that means that that means that form main can have a constructor with injected services and on down turtles all the way down, right?
That is exactly right. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So let's move over, because before we can actually use this, we need to do something else here. We need to have that service provider. By the way, I created that service provider already as being a public static iService provider. So that's available throughout the application. And now, instead of the application.run new form main, I will change this. And what we'll do is I will use the service provider and get a required service here, which will be my form main.
Nice.
And yeah, because I've registered this as being transient, it will just get me a new instance. What I can also do to make things a bit cooler is I can also go register something else here, which is my customer store. I'm doing that as a singleton.
So in memory.
And there is something else that I need to do here, and that is, again, going back to the documentation, which is necessary also for the web view to work properly. We need to do something, and this is slightly different, but let me see if I can find it somewhere here. We need to add a method, which is this one.
Okay.
Yeah, but what the example does is that they configure the services in the main form.
Right.
But I am configuring it on the program level base. So that gives us a bit more power. So I'm just going to copy over this line and get that right into the application. And I can just put it nicely here.
Nice.
And another thing that we can do is we can actually go to our program.cs file of the Blazor application and take a couple of things over from there as well. So for instance, we want to use the DevExpress Blazor controls, and that requires to have this configured. I will use the weather forecast service as well. So I will just copy this over.
You've already got the customer store, so
Yeah.
Don't need that.
Yeah.
And that's just
already
an
in.
in-memory database, kind of in-memory data
Oh, yeah.
store?
Yeah.
Cool.
We'll get over that like in a minute or so.
Okay.
It's quite simple, but just for testing purposes, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this one is not using the builder construction, so we'll do it like this.
Sure.
And the weather forecast service, I didn't copy that over. So let me copy that over from the project, the Blazor project, and I'm going to put it like straight into that WinForms application.
Okay.
And if I go back here, it is all a-okay.
Nice.
And now we can solve the problem, well, basically what we had with configuring that web view here.
Right.
Because we have transformed the application in using dependency injection, I can now say, give me a service provider. Service provider, that's going to be the iService provider, if I'm correct. I am going to get that customer store as well.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we'll get a bit more, but for now, we'll leave that. No, I'm going to do another thing. I'm going to do the customer's control as well. The customer's control is the one holding the grid.
Okay.
Like this.
Yeah.
So I can now add a couple of things really quickly in code. So I will have that service provider, that customer store. I can replace that quickly with this one. And that customer control, I can just remove this one. And as you can see, that requires the customer store as well. You see that?
Yep.
And this is obviously what makes dependency injection quite cool.
Right. Because that customer's control will already be configured.
Control, yeah.
Yeah.
Like this.
Mm-hmm.
As you can see, that web view services and the red wobbly line has gone away because it's now getting that same collection of services. And yeah, another interesting thing here is that you need to specify that host page, which is the index.html that we just created, and the root component that we want to add. So now the only thing that we need to do is we need to call that load Blazor method and hand some Blazor component in. But before we can do that, we need to put in a couple of Blazor controls, right?
Right.
So I like to add a folder here, and that folder, I'll call it Blazor. So we'll have a clear view that everything that's in there is going to be Blazor related. What I'm going to take over is from the Blazor application, I will get the layout folder, the pages, and the routes.
You need to import. Oh, no, you already have imports, don't you?
Yeah, the app.razor with Blazor 8 is like configuring everything, which we already did in the index.html.
What about underscore imports? Do you need that too? I'm
going to put that, I'm going to take that over as well, but I'm going to put it in the root of the WinForms application.
Okay.
So let's first drag these ones, put them right here.
Okay.
And let's get this one. I need to change a couple of namespaces, as you can see, but let's put it in anyway. And in this case, I will need to change these to DX Blazor WinForms.
Yeah.
And this one can go away completely. This one needs to be changed to Blazor. I could have better called it the components folder, but
yeah, whenever you do this kind of stuff, sharing code between projects, you're always going to have to do this. Change your using statements. Namespaces matter.
That's true. But fortunately, we all mastered the copy and paste technology, so no big deal here.
Clipboard inheritance.
Exactly. There is one other important thing that we need to change, though, before we can actually start having some fun. And that is inside the pages. We have a very nice new feature in Blazor 8, which is called rendering modes. Remember?
Yeah, sure. They don't make sense in a Windows Forms app, do they?
Exactly.
They only make sense in a web environment.
And I can assure you it's even worse, because if you leave it in, you'll get an error.
Yeah.
So I will save you that and get it out. I hope that they'll be able to do something with this in
Just
the future,
ignore them,
because
maybe.
you could imagine if you have like a Razor class library where you have that render mode in,
Yeah.
and you want to reference that in your WinForms project,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you'll have to deal with that somehow.
On
So
one hand, I think, well, they could just ignore it. But on the other hand, I think, well, then you have something in your code that you might think is necessary and even being used. So it is more precise to remove it, I think, even though it's a little bit clunky.
yeah, true.
Mm-hmm. Fact of life.
All right, so we have now copied in that stuff, and we typically didn't change a lot. Let's finally call that super cool method that I created, which is load Blazor.
Yes. So this would be the root component, right? The root page, the
Yes.
very first page, your start page, if you will. And you could have other
Yeah,
components and pages that route from there, but this is going to be the main page.
But in this case, there is one thing I will not. I mean, it would make sense to call that index as being our root, but I won't do it. I'm gonna call the routes instead.
Okay, sure.
Routes it was, and the reason for that is that these pages, they have these page directives. You see.
Yeah.
And if I want to navigate inside that Blazor application, it is super simple to use that same approach.
The router is the wrapper around the whole shebang.
Exactly. So that is why I'm calling that routes. And if I'm not mistaken, we have done everything necessary to get things going. Let's see if the application welcomes us with some things that I forgot to put in.
I think you're in good shape here.
It works. Let's see what happens if we run the application.
Hey, look at that. So that's the Windows Forms grid, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
As if nothing happened. It's just the same, except it's now using dependency injection.
Right.
And I can still go to Mr. Saxon Smith and change its name.
Sure.
Like this. And if I now go to my Blazor index.
Hey.
Hello, Blazor.
Yeah.
And because I put that routes as a root component, I can click away here. I can even go to the weather.
Did you code that back to home button, or did that come for free?
Yeah, that button is part of the project template of DevExpress.
I see.
Yeah. And we can go to customers. And do you see what I see? How cool is that?
That is cool. Using the same in-memory data store.
Yep.
So when you edit it in one place, it shows up in the other, obviously, because it's a single source of truth.
So, but let's...
Yeah, we got to be able to do a little more, right?
Of course.
Let's kick it up a notch.
Yeah. So I'm going to do exactly that. So I'll close down the application, and you asked me about that data store.
Yeah.
I'll show you the data store. It's quite simple, but we can do some cool stuff. That data store is where did I put that in the application? It should be somewhere right here. Yeah. So the customer data store, it has an observable collection of customers. Further, it reads in some data from the JSON file, which is not very high tech. But the interesting thing with the observable collection is that whenever something changes in the collection, like an item is being updated or added or deleted, there is an event being triggered.
Yep.
So I have nicely encapsulated that event in this data store and did a couple of things. But what this means is that when I go to my main form, which is my main container of the UI, the main stuff here, I can actually go here and say this.customer store, customer changed, and bind an event to it.
Nice.
I've coded that event already, at least the body of the event. So if I go here it's going to be that customer's collection changed, right?
Mhm.
And what I should also do is in the form closed, I
Unhook the
should
event.
detach that event, obviously,
Yeah.
to not get any memory
Right.
troubles.
If it's your only form, it's going away. There's no problem, but it's a good habit to get into.
Yeah. Yeah. So another thing which I didn't show you is that I've put up a small little control here that you will not see design time, but you will see that at runtime, which is a little alert control. It's like a message on the right bottom of your screen. It's from
Okay.
DevExpress. And you
Nice.
can just push a message up or a whole bunch of them. It doesn't matter.
Little
And the
toast
way
pop-up
that
kind of thing.
works, yeah, like a toaster, pretty much. So whenever something's changing in that customer collection, it will fire away.
Nice.
So what happens now
And so
is if I go
that's
here,
in your data collection, which is a singleton. So both the Windows Forms part of it and the Blazor part of it share the same thing in memory. So no matter where you change
well,
it, it's going to pop
shall
that
I
toast,
first
right?
see? You see that toast? This is the WinForms grid, right?
Yeah. Now you're in the Blazor grid. Same thing. That's so cool. So
We're
cool.
gonna do. You want to see something cooler?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so let's see how we can interact with the Blazor application. So if I click the index, the Blazor index thing, it will go to the index. But if I want to navigate directly to the counter, I mean, this doesn't do anything right now.
Right.
So how can we do something with it? Or how can we typically interact with like something from within Blazor and something of WinForms?
So you want
Have
to
you thought
mix
that?
and match, truly mix and
Yeah,
match. Yeah.
yeah. So let's do that.
Okay.
For that, you can use another approach, and which is something that you have talked about as well, but I've done it slightly different, which is the application bridge. And in this case, what we can do is this is a class, it is just a normal class, and it has a reference to, in this case, my main layout of Blazor. In my main layout, I didn't point that out, I have put in a public method which allows me to navigate. So what I do now, or what I at least can do, is if I go to my program CS file and I will add a singleton, which is going to be my app bridge, there will only be one instance available.
Right.
In my form main, what I can do now is I can have that app bridge injected.
Of course.
So let's put that in. And what I need to do whenever this main form loads, I will need to set the reference of the main form to this. Before I can actually do that, I need something else in the bridge. I need to have that main form as well.
So you got to have a reference to the form.
Yeah.
Yep.
And in my app layout, I need to do something as well, obviously. So here, if I go to my Blazor, I can now here
Inject the form.
inject my app bridge.
Oh, you inject the app bridge, which has a reference to the form. You're all mixed and matched here.
Yeah.
That's great.
App bridge dot what was it? Main layout.
Yeah.
Typically, you would need to have an iDisposable interface as well.
Yeah.
And detach that event. Let me see.
It's just a capital A there.
Yeah, of course. And I think
it's called Blazor layout.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So if I now go back to my main form, so I have that all set up correctly. In that form closed, I should actually, if I want to do it officially, I have to go to the app bridge and clear that main form, right?
Yep.
And now what I can do, I can now say that element 4, I should have given those a different names, man, but
so
I don't know which item it is.
This is the accordion element, the menu on the other side there.
Yeah.
Got it. So that's the counter.
Now I still have to check the properties here, which is element 4 is the Blazor counter. You see that?
Yep.
So element 4, I can now just call that app_bridge.blazor layout. If it's unequal to null, I can navigate to the counter.
Great.
And the second one, I can do the same. And I can navigate to, what was it? Customers, I think, right?
Yeah.
So, and with this approach, you actually don't reload that entire web view again, but you're just going to
So
the
that
grid.
was the customers, not the index, but okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool.
You see?
Very good. I love the way that you're just mixing, moving, and matching seamlessly between Windows Forms and Blazor. It, as I said, it opens up a world of possibilities. And thanks for showing us these cool DevExpress tools, as well as the techniques of doing hybrid Windows Forms Blazor apps. Thanks.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. And yeah, let's have a good build.
Yep. And we'll see you on the other side.